So welcome. This is my very first webinar I've ever done. So have some patience with me. And also we've done a lot of things this year and even before the pandemic with New Brunswick Adoption Foundation in terms of Zoom and streaming things and doing all things. But this is a little bit of we're stretching our skill set here tonight around doing a webinar. And I'm going to flip to the PowerPoint in just a sec, but I just thought, it's nice to see everyone's faces for a bit. And I'm just so happy so many people have come, and we've got a really great mix of people, a lot of adoptive parents, some foster parents, some people who are wanting to adopt and hope to be parenting soon. Also some social workers, thank you. So tonight is about understanding trauma reactions. And we're not going to really talk, we're going to talk about what those behaviors look like, but a lot of what we're going to talk about is why those behaviors happen. So it's what's happening underneath it. And so our subtitle is, what does survival feel like? So for kids who, many of you are parenting or caring for in many different ways, a lot of these behaviors come out of survival. And we even those of us that, had relatively healthy, life circumstances, we all have traumatic experiences and we all have trauma reactions. So some of the stuff we're going to talk about, hopefully will ring true for you personally, because we all have times where, we react in a way that's very deep as opposed to well thought out reaction. So that's I'm going to flip now to the PowerPoint. So it also Happy Adoption Awareness Month, November. That's our first slide. Okay, everyone can see this all right, eh? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so understanding trauma responses, what survival feels like for children. And we are really focusing on the sort of 4 F's, we call them, which is kind of a fun letter to be talking about because sometimes you feel frustrated. So the fight, freeze, fawn, and flight. A lot of people are probably very familiar with fight and flight. That gets spoken about a lot. Fawn is something, is fairly not discussed as much, and it's a little bit more confusing. So when we dig into that, it'll be interesting discussion for all of us. So this quote I came across as I was preparing for this: feeling safe is the treatment for trauma. So like one of the things we want to do with this workshop is to put a different lens on behavior, and even the word behavior we've been talking about. And really it's not, we talk about, kids biting or kids hitting or whatever, right? And it's almost like the behavior is less important in understanding this. It's what's happening underneath it. So when we think of how do we help these kids, the idea is to create safety. So feeling safe is a treatment. And for all of you who love and care for children who've had a lot of trauma, your work around and your relationship in building safety is key. So I was going to put this at the very end, but I thought, no, I'm putting it at the front because it's too important an idea. So you may see it at the end again. Okay. So along with that, similar. So we want you to think about how when kids are having trauma reactions, think survival, not disobedience. So when you think about the fight reaction, the flight reaction, all of those reactions, it's really around their survival brain kicking in. It's not really a choice. Think safety, not punishment. And we often think, I know that even people who understand this, sometimes you think, well, maybe I should be doing, reacting more harshly to the behavior because the behavior often is way out of line. But thinking about it more as you need to help them create safety. It's not like punishing isn't going to necessarily fix the behavior, or isn't going to fix the behavior. And then think brainstem, not cortex. So I'm going to go into a little bit around brain, some of the brain research, and some of you may are probably familiar with Dr. Bruce Perry, which a lot of what I drew on is his material. So we're just going to go through that real quick. So what's actually happening inside our brains? How does complex trauma change our brains? And one of the things that, as I was preparing for this, and as we've been thinking about this, working with an adoption and working with families who've been through care, people probably know about PTSD, and then they know about kids who've had complex trauma. And the big difference is that trauma happened for children at a very young age as their brains were first developing. So it's built in to how they view the world. Where PTSD, would generally be for someone who had a relatively healthy experience and then had an extremely traumatic experience and have difficulty processing that. So it's two there's a lot of similarities, but complex trauma is more in the building blocks of the brain. So that kids who've been through, the kids that we know and love and care about, their brains have been wired for survival. And we think about, really our brains are designed for relationships. And what's happened for these kids is they've had to be more focused on survival. So it has hampered how they then can operate in the world, because they're focusing on, how am I going to be okay? How am I going to be okay? And even when they're now in very healthy circumstances, their brain is still got that wiring, and it takes a long time to let go of those survival strategies. Just, deciding I want to let go of those survival strategies is one thing. Actually having a brain that allows you to do that is also another layer to it, right? So the kids are reactive, right? So just in a real simple, this is a very simple way of describing a really complicated organ, the brain. So on the left is what happens for a brain that's being built with typical development. So the pink area is the brainstem, pink or orange, however your screen looks. So that's sort of survival focused. The green, the sort of lime green and dark green is the limbic, the sort of social emotional regulation, that level of our brain. And then the blue or purple is cognition. So when you look at like a typical child or typical person who's had a typical environment, obviously everybody's had a little bit of trauma in their lives, but, relatively speaking, a very healthy experience. The amount of brain activity and brain development that's focused on survival is relatively small, and that they're able to develop the other parts of their brain and really use those parts of their brain in a really healthy way. Where for a child that's gone through significant trauma over and over and over again, and at a very, very young age, they're focused on survival. So their brain is actually built in sort of an opposite way, where a lot of energy, time, wiring is focused on survival. How do I survive? How, the idea of relationships and processing things and decision-making is secondary, because trauma, being a traumatic experience, is survival. It's like being in a burning house over and over and over and over again. You don't really care if the windows bring in the nice light. You care about, I need to get out of this house. You're not worried about the design of the house. You're not worried about how does it all work. You're just needing to survive. So that just gives you an idea of, like, it's important when we think of these kids, think of our kids that we're thinking about, remembering that their brains really are different. They have the capacity to develop all the other parts of their brain, but they've had this start that has built this framework for them, right? So they're not going to just let it go, because even if they wanted to, it's like their brain is designed according to their experience, right? Okay, Okay, so the other thing, now this is for anyone who's just thinking about the brain, and sort of this is this simple drawing, and just think of, I mean, it's actually similar to the way our brain really is in terms of, you know, the brainstem's at the bottom and our cortex is at the top, right? So when we're calm, that neocortex is working, right? And you're able to make decisions, you're able to think through something, you know, nothing's really setting you off, right? You're able to think positively and make some pretty good decisions, right? So it's a calm. So then if you look at when you're in freeze mode, and we'll talk a little bit later about what that looks like, but when you're in freeze mode, and this is for anybody, because we can all, even help people who've had healthy experiences at times act this way. You're at a brainstem level, right? So the neocortex is where we're expecting good decision making, right? So why are you doing what you're doing? Well, it's because I'm trying to survive, because I'm at this red zone, not at the blue zone, right? So if you look at the percentages of energy that's in those, that gives you an idea of, and just, you know, it's almost like, you know, it's a simple drawing, but if we could just almost put it on the sides of our head so that we understand what's going on inside those little brains, right? Now, if you look at flight or fight, it's even more extreme, right? Where the ability to process at a neocortex level is so limited. And even though the circumstance may not actually be that dangerous, kids who've been through complex trauma will feel like they'll feel that they're unsafe, even when they're safe. So their brains will react to situations that are not necessarily that dangerous, but because they've been through so many dangerous situations, they're primed, and any little trigger will put them in this, any little reminder, any, you know, anything can set them off. So it's very much you know, operating your brainstem level, which is not where kids can make decisions, right? So just remembering it's, I guess the point of this too is that it's a reaction. It's not a choice. And these are that we're talking about the most extreme behaviors kids have. You know, so when they're acting in ways that are the least desirable, it's when they're operating in their brainstem. So it's not like they're choosing to go way off the rails. They're just in a very survival mode focus. So we're just going to dig into, and anybody too through this, if you have any questions or comments, maybe just put them in the comment section. And we are going to have some small group discussions so people have a chance to exchange ideas, because I know there's lots of knowledge and awareness in this group. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with fight. I'm just going to click on here. And this actually just takes us right straight to our website. So all of this information that we're presenting tonight, we're going to actually send you the PowerPoint, but we'll also, we're accessing our website quite a bit too. So it's right there on our website. So when you're in a fight response, this is how kids are feeling. I can't be cross at the people I really want to be cross at. I wish I had people who loved me. I wish I could go somewhere safe. I am so unlovable. I want to die. I wish I could talk. I wish I was wanted. Why wasn't I good enough? I'm going to push you away before you get rid of me. I wish you would notice how scary this all is. I feel unsafe. And I think for all of them, that sense of not being safe is fundamental. I need to be in control and make things more predictable. So back to sort of that idea too of, you know, safety is the treatment. So this lovely setup that we, you know, Patricia set up on our website from another website, has strategies for each of the four. How can you make me feel safe? So the idea is when kids are doing these things, you know, assuming you can keep your cortex activated and you can think through these steps. The idea is, how can I make this child feel safe? Not how can I fix it? How can I stop it? It's how can I make them feel safe? So here's some specific strategies for when your child is in a fight mode. Tell me you love me even though my behavior pushes you away. Don't punish me for being cross. Reward me with your kindness, and love for getting calm again. So reward them for getting, like if they're spinning and then they're starting to calm down, you really want to jump in with the rewards around how good it is that you've managed that feeling. Keep me safe from hurting myself. Match my energy, which is another way of saying be attuned, like understand where their feelings are at. Deep breathing, chewy foods. And the chewy foods really kind of help them feel grounded and more sensory. So that's a way at that brainstem level, it's more of a sensory experience is the way to get calm again. Hanging, swinging, climbing, warm bath with lots of bubbles, warm milk or hot chocolate, hot water bottle, super soft teddy and blanket. Give me something to do that makes me feel important, because kids will feel a lot of shame around this after the fact too, right? Connect with me and show me empathy before exploring the consequences of my behavior. And we're going to talk about that, when to talk about the consequences later in the session. Let me have somewhere safe to go so I can calm down with or without you. Make things predictable. And I find that whole predictability thing, like almost all kids who've been through traumatic experience, predictability is really important because life had too many unexpected things happening for them. Tell me about changes before they happen, especially if strangers are coming into the house or have somewhere to go new. Accept that I might not know how to behave in that way. I might not remember what happened. So some kids, after they have these experiences, sometimes they totally blank it out and they don't even remember what just happened. It's just so overwhelming. Listen and acknowledge how I feel. Even if you see it differently, it will help me feel listened to. So even if you really are really upset with the behavior and it's behavior you really don't think is okay, having that sense of being heard will help them move past the behavior. So one of the things we want to do, we have this description, but there's nothing quite like the real thing. And so we're really pleased to have, I should have introduced you guys at the beginning, Catherine Derry, who's from the New Brunswick Adoption Foundation, and Patricia Esterbrooks. And they're helping in the background with this and help me with preparation for this as well. Although they're adoptive parents, so they have, the lived experience of what it's like. So Catherine's going to talk a little bit about her experience with a child who uses fight as a way to feel safe, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give an example and I'll give a little background. My youngest, she does only feel safe when she's like in a routine and things are predictable. And we were just talking about predictability makes you feel safe. So if something goes off of that track, she can go to this fight response. So I believe it was this summer, we were driving in the car and we were getting ready to go to her speech therapy appointment, and she adores her speech therapist and she'd already planned out her day. Here's what we're doing in the morning. Here's what I'm doing in the afternoon. And I've got my Bluetooth on because I'm driving. So a phone call comes in and she can hear it. And it's her speech therapist who has to cancel the appointment at the last minute because of illness. So I don't have time to prep her for the change, or all she hears is a speech therapist saying, I have to cancel, So I knew fight was coming. We hung up the phone and immediately I hear the crying and I knew it was just seconds. And then there's arms and legs flailing, fists, things are coming being thrown about the car, and we had to pull over and do some calming stuff, because when that routine from predictability goes away, she doesn't feel safe, and she goes into a total big fight response.
Right.
And it happens in under a minute, like from the news to the big response.
Right. And do you feel there was any choice?
No.
Yeah.
No, she had everything planned out. She sees it in her head, and she repeats how her day's going to go all the
Yeah.
time. So that was a big change.
Yeah.
Usually, as a parent, we would prep for that, but sometimes those things happen, right?
Right. Right. And I imagine all of you here who are currently parenting kids have your own fight story in your head. And it is brainstem, it's at that level. It's not a choice, and it's part of them finding safety, right? So thanks, Catherine. It's great. I'm going to just go back to, let's get some techie. Okay, so then we're going to do flight. So this one's flight is pretty straightforward. I mean, the reasons behind it are complicated. Okay, so flight. When I'm in flight, my response feels like, I need to get out of here. I'm in danger. I need to find somewhere safe. I want to escape, but I can't. The people I'm with cannot keep me safe. When you feel, that's how kids feel at that time. Even though you can, they don't feel like that because the adults before didn't, right? If I do not leave this situation, I may die. Like there's that actual, even though now it may not be true, they genuinely feel that way. I'm not as important as my sister, brother, cousin, friend. I'm not worth much. I'm worth nothing at all. So there's that sense of, I don't matter. I'm completely alone in the world. I must not show how I feel to anyone. They won't want me anymore. I must not tell anyone how I feel. They won't want me anymore. I don't belong here. I'm not part of this family. So it's very much avoidance focused. So in terms of what you can do, again, it's really a scared child, right? Keep me close by, even if they're, try to be as close to them as they'll let you be. Find me again, like assuming they've run off, like, and be happy when you see them. Keep breathing. Give me a familiar and easy chore to do so you can help get them back into that regulated state. Crunchy foods, again, carrot sticks, cookies, rice cakes. There's a lot about eating. And part of that is they need to be inside their body again. That when they're in flight mode, it's like they've detached and they're just, dissociating, right? Tell me that I'm safe with you, modeling calming techniques, hanging from monkey bars, talk through what you think I'm finding tricky, using a kind voice. So in a very, sort of gently start the conversation. Heavy blankets are always great. Create a safe space where I can hide away when I need to. So try maybe doing that even before, even for if you have kids that haven't actually done this, it's always good to have a place. And I know some schools have this set up, trauma-informed schools. Tug of war, cup of warm milk and hot chocolate, hot water bottle and soft teddy. Recognize you might not find normal family life threatening, but I might see things you can't. Accept that I feel threatened. It's not just messing about or horseplay to me. I feel in real danger. Like sometimes it seems silly. Flight is kind of silliness can be, but there's an actual underlying fear. If you send me off to do something and I forget, don't make it a big deal. Just patiently ask me to do it again and give me safe ways to run. I remember being in a workshop and someone who had a child that, would run away. They said they kind of set up something where it's like, okay, you can run around this block. So it was a, kind of a strategy so that they could just let go and because it's like they've been tied up, right? So to get the real world experience here. We've got Patricia Asterbrooks who's going to jump in here.
Hi, everybody. So
Yeah.
I've got two kids who both show flight in different ways. I wanted to first say that flight's very particular because we assume, like, when you think, oh, fight or flight, you think flight, that means running. Like you think it's physically running, but you realize as you go through these and we chat through that there's different aspects to flight. Flight can also be like doing anything but paying attention to what's going on. So someone who looks distracted, or like Suzanne was saying, acting silly. You know, when sometimes you're having that moment with the kids and it's a serious moment and you can't figure out why this is the time they chose to sing that silly song that's super annoying and just go, oh, you know, but that's what's happening. It's their flight response. They're trying to get away from a difficult situation, whether that's physically or emotionally. And it's almost it is a difficult one to deal with because you don't know how to bring the child back. Sometimes I can give you an example to how surprising it is, how it almost goes against nature sometimes, but it's such a visceral reaction that they have. I remember once we were out camping and my daughter was maybe 3 years old, and we had been around the campfire and she fell asleep around the campfire with us there. The tent is just, you know, a little bit away. And when she woke up, I don't even know what set her off other than she was in an unfamiliar environment and she got scared, I guess. And you would think, you know, as a reasoning person, you think if a child feels in danger or feels scared, they would run to their parent. But my husband and I were trying to calm her down because she was blown out, like full on meltdown, screaming. And we were like, oh my God, it's the middle of the night, it's camping. Who's going to come and what are you doing to this child who's screaming all of a sudden? So we're trying to calm her down. And as we tried to come near her to bring her down, she just ran into the pitch black woods away from us. Because for her in that moment, that was safer than being where she was right now. I can't imagine if you are in a reasonable thinking brain that you would think that that's the safe place to be. And that's really an example of what it's like when they're in that extreme mode. There's no choice to run in, like no child would choose to run into the black woods. So it was really her body reacting to that. And that was her reaction. I see my little guy, my boy who's a little older, he tends to do that silly, giddy thing. And I can see it in his face. He gets this like mischievous look on his face and he starts almost vibrating. And that means he's reaching a level of discomfort where he needs to disappear from this situation. And that's his way of running. And for him, we found you know, he goes and hides in his room. He physically flies. He runs in his room and he has a top bunk. So he'll cower in his top bunk with his blankets and so on. And it can be difficult as a parent because you wonder why children who you've never been physical with are actually having a physical reaction to you. They're scared of you all of a sudden. Right. For my daughter, she likes little dark, cozy places. So she goes into this little tent she has. And as Suzanne was saying, we found those places with them, right? We found where's a place that you feel safe. So if they have to run, they go there and we don't have to worry that they're in an unsafe place and they get to sort of calm themselves and find themselves again.
Yeah. And one of the things that, you know, Patricia and I had talked about this earlier, and she said, you know, some of these things are, you know, reacting in the moment because they've been triggered and traumatized, you know, they're acting in a trauma reactive way. But there's a lot of things you can do proactively. So that idea of preventing or addressing it as they're starting to, you know, if you can, sometimes you can't.
No, like the you know, giving them something important to do. When I start seeing my little guy starting to boil over and I go, okay, I have to help him get distracted from the moment so that at least it's a managed distraction versus a dissociation, right?
Right. We're going to look at Fawn. Now, Fawn's a little tricky because kids that tend to use this trauma reaction, they've learned stay under the radar, don't make any waves, get along, your feelings, their feelings are less important than everyone else's. So they're almost like the perfect child in some ways, right? Because they don't want to bother anybody. That is how they survived, right? And that's going to keep them safe, right? So I'm going to just click on it and give a little bit more detail around that. What a cutie this little girl is, eh? Okay, when I'm on, so when you actually look at how you're actually feeling, these are really sad statements. Like I found it quite difficult actually to go through this, because it is, you know, they're often the kids that seem really okay, but underneath it all, they're not. So hurting myself helps me feel something, you know, kids self-harm. Drinking alcohol or taking drugs help me feel happy. If I join social media, I can talk to strangers who don't judge me and might care for me. I'm not as good as everyone else. I'm useless. This isn't going to get any better, so I might as well give up. No one would care or notice if I live or die. It's all my fault. I'm unlovable. I can't win in this world. I'll never be safe. Nothing will feel okay. I want to die. I already feel dead inside. So those very quiet, no waves, you barely hear them often. Or they can be sometimes really charming and friendly, but it's at a very superficial level, and because it's their survival strategy, right? So in terms of, it's hard to catch this. It's really important, like as caregivers, that we notice when this is happening, because in some ways it can be very low maintenance until a crisis occurs, right? How can you help me feel safe again? See me, listen to me. So even when they're not asking, find ways to make them feel heard, right? Give me small, repetitive things to do. Weighted blankets, playing with Lego and Play-Doh. Tell me I'm safe. Deep breathing, swinging. I was in another workshop too, talking about trauma and how doing repetitive things, it's very soothing. They actually, like, there's brain research around, if you do repetitive things, it actually helps soothe and calm your brain. Let me spend quiet time just with you. Understand that social media might symbolize a comforting connection. So we have, you know, in some of these, there's like watch TV, you know, let them watch TV or watch TV together. And like some of those things, you know, obviously they're not ideal things for kids to spend their time doing, but sometimes they need it, right? And sometimes doing it with them is very positive. Hot chocolate and crunchy cookies. Wrap me up in a soft blanket, let me watch TV. Understand that playing computer games lets me be by myself somewhere safe. Recognize that I'm hurting inside and might need professional help. Know that I'm easily bullied. Look out for this rather than expect me to tell you. Like a lot of these kids won't say this is happening. They don't want to make you feel bad, right? It's all about making you feel okay. That's how they've been sort of wired, right? Know that I'm easy. Oh, sorry. Appreciate, I will say whatever I think you want me to say. So sometimes I'll just give that answer. You know, they won't really let you know how they really feel. And in a lot of cases, these kids don't actually know how they really feel because they've been so programmed to say what other people want, right? Be aware that I'm an easy target and can get coerced easily to keep the peace. Appreciate I cannot cope being the center of attention or the focused person. So not really wanting attention, because attention can be dangerous. Watch me removing myself, standing on the outside of what's going on, a warm bath, warm towel, and warm pajamas. After our webinar, we can all do that last part. So we're going to have, Catherine's going to talk about her child who tends to use this. And I'm going to just give a little description on the side here, but Catherine's going to give the real life equivalent of this, right?
And I can see people in the chat saying that can your kids have a mix of these? And Patricia's responding back that,
oh,
yeah, yes, they can. And I'm going to be describing the same child, my youngest, from the fight response in the Fawn response. So it really is real life. So Fawn is something I see less and less. My daughter is 13 and came home at 2, and each year it's been a little bit less, but she was always the child, like every stranger she met, she wanted to like her and respond to her. Like she would send signals out, you know, to please them in ways. And every therapist who ever worked with her, therapist, professional, EA, teacher, thought they were the favorite, you know, like, oh, I have such a special bond because she's busy trying to please them. And it was to such an extreme that, you know, until she was 9 or 10, we saw fight at home, but because she fought, nobody else saw it. So we had help getting services and things for her, because everybody like, I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you're overreacting, you know, because she was like that. But the example I can best think of is she was probably about 8, and she had a big tantrum before going to school. Such a big one. She was in such a big fight that I couldn't brush her hair. So she's got this wild, crazy hair going in every direction. And her face is, she's like all red in the face, and the tears are still going down her face. And still like, I gotta go to school in the middle of it. So we take her to school. And as we're walking out and she still got the crazy hair and the tears, she was actually smoothing her hair down. There's tears still on her face. And she's like, how are you? And like very smiling and greeting everybody, and wanting to make a good impression. And they knew at this point, they knew, because you can't look at somebody looking like that without wondering what happened before drop off. Yeah.
And we do see, you know, I would say in the adoption community, it's not uncommon for a child that's fawning to become a fight.
Yes.
Like I think you see that transition sometimes, and it's really difficult to go from one to the other.
Now
for the parent.
she would use at school, because she's become more secure in her life over, you know, the last 11 years, that she feels secure everywhere. So they see fight at school when she's upset. But I feel like that is healthier because she trusts people more.
Right.
Because you'll find kids who fawn all day at school. When, you know, you'll hear that, oh, they're so perfect at school. And then they come home and you get that utter meltdown. And honestly, it's because they've had to work so hard the entire day to present well. They're fawning, they're hiding their true emotions. Once they get home and they're in that safe space, they can finally just let it go. And although we tend to get the brunt of it at home and it's hard, it's actually a positive thing that in your home, it's fight and not fawn, because they're comfortable and safe enough that they can let their real emotion show. So
and fawn too is it's kind of quiet, so you really, it can be harder because you don't really know how they're feeling. So okay, thank you, Catherine. Okay, now we're going to switch to freeze. Okay, so when I'm in freeze, this is what I feel. I'm a failure. You're going to send me away. I can't be who I want to be. I'm not worth bothering with. I feel shame. I hate myself. I need to go somewhere safe. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm an outsider. I don't belong here with you. I can't do this. You will get rid of me when you realize. I'm humiliated, embarrassed. I'm scared. I need to feel safe. I can't bear your rejection. Okay, so pretty heavy feelings, these little people. So feeling safe again, these are some strategies, and you'll see some overlap. So a lot of the how can you help me feel safe are there's similar ways to cope within all of these different reactions, because ultimately at a really simplistic level, it's fear, right? At a very deep level. Stay with me, don't leave me alone. Tell me I'm okay and that I'm safe with you. Watching TV with me. Deep breathing. Spinning on a swing, climbing, hanging, rolling or cycling down a hill. Digging in the garden in some sand. Jumping on a trampoline. Carry out the chore you have asked me to do with me. So sometimes if they're not quite, you know, it's like they're stuck, right? It's like being almost a little support for them so that there's still that you can get through this. And it's a very supportive way to help them not feel bad about it. Gently wonder where I have gone and invite me back to the room. If I've forgotten what I was supposed to be doing, remind me again gently. So it's a bit of a trance, right? Hot chocolate, yum. Piece of crunchy toast. Again, that sort of sensory experience is really important. A nice warm bath, warm towel, and put a soft teddy with me. Okay, so Patricia is going to talk about her experience with freeze.
So my son freezes a lot. He's one of those, and I'll tell you, freeze. Although fight, fawn, all those are difficult. Freeze can be particularly difficult as a parent because when you're trying to connect with someone and all you get is a blank stare and not even an acknowledgement that you're in front of them, it's hard to not react and go, hello, can you hear me? Are you there? Because that's what will happen. I know when my son goes into freeze, I can ask him something like, did you finish your homework? And for some reason that could be triggering for him. And he doesn't want to tell me that he had a difficult time and he didn't finish it. He might be scared that he's going to get in trouble, which is not the truth, but that's what he feels.
Yeah.
And they just freeze entirely and just look at complete non-response. And it's really hard as an adult to not go, hey, listen to me, please respond. Like I asked your question, what's going on? So that's one aspect of freeze. And I know in school, he has a difficult time with that because an adult will ask a question and just freeze in place. And really it can be physical freezing too, not just, kind of deer in the headlights. In dangerous situations, they could actually, if they're scared that when a car's coming and they're scared they're going to get hit or something, rather than run, a child who freezes might just stay in place and freeze. So there's some physical danger too. Mm-hmm. Another thing that kids do when they freeze, I lost my train of thought there. But I find, I'll tell you, I find with my son, freeze is about connecting with him. So I'm not going to get a response from him, but I do, maybe the sensory things really work with him. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but one last aspect of freeze that you don't think of as freeze really is you'll get lies sometimes. It's the way they protect themselves. So the little lies like, oh yes, I flushed the toilet. Oh yes, I picked up after myself, because they just want to not acknowledge what's going on. So they put up like this wall. That's what freeze looks like, at least for us at home.
Mm-hmm. And when you say it's sort of a disconnecting from that experience, they've learned that by disconnecting from painful situations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I find too, like, freeze is the hardest one to come back around to because kids actually dissociate. If you want to talk to them about what happened and what triggered their freeze, they might not even remember what you were talking about. And then it becomes a struggle when you go, what do you mean you didn't say that? Of course you said that, especially when those little lies. And it's really that they really don't know. And like I said, that's hard as an adult to go, okay, I just have to let them.
Yeah. And when you think about as a young child, how they learned that strategy by being in a situation they had to disconnect from, right?
Yeah.
So it's very difficult. Okay. So, I know for me, I learn best when I get to interact with people. And I know we have a really big group here, but we found a way, just discovered breakout rooms on Zoom.
She's very excited.
I'm very excited about this. So we're going to try and do this. And so what we want you to do, we're going to break you into groups, and it's just going to be random groups. And I know some of you are currently parenting children. Some of you are waiting to parent. Some of you are students. Some of you are professionals. But, if you're parenting a child, think of the child you know. But, this trauma reactions, it could be your partner, anyone you're close to, right? Thinking about, times where others who you're close to have had trauma reactions. Okay. Welcome back. I think that's everyone. So how'd that go? Was it helpful?
We had a good one.
Yeah.
We definitely shared a lot, different perspectives. Feel free to unmute yourself, guys.
Yeah, why don't we just have a bigger discussion? It's like,
I think it was good for us to share. A couple of us shared actual examples of when our children were in different responses. We talked about how it's hard not to take it personally sometimes, because it's right at you, right? And we talked too about how if you're a waiting parent, it can be scary to hear of all these stories and all these reaction that kids have, but we're reassuring to say that we really share this with waiting parents to prepare you for that. So you sort of understand the journey that kids have. And we talked about how at the beginning, sometimes kids can seem like they're perfectly fine and happy. And then slowly you can start seeing some cracks as they get settled into your home. And then there's they feel safe. So all of a sudden those behaviors come out more. And that's when you notice. And now it's important to realize that the worse they are with you, the better they're doing. So
yes. It does kind of like, it means they feel safe enough to be unsafe. Kind of, okay, anyone else have comments about that part of it? We have a few other elements to go through tonight. I know it's getting late for people, but we'll get you back.
Yeah, so in our group, there was lots of recognition of what those signs are, lots of people understanding really what those trauma responses look like, and people getting, from what we've talked about tonight, some ideas on how to handle them, and also how hard it is on the person dealing with them.
Yeah.
I see Liette has a hand up.
Oh. Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah, thanks. No, I just wanted to say it's good to get those breakout rooms. Definitely. I think we were just a bit slow going. So maybe just like get a facilitator next time to kind of get us going. But there was definitely some good sharing in that we see our kids go from one response to the next depending on either the person they're with, the context that the event is happening in, and it's not always easy to pinpoint if is this a trauma response or is it a learning disability or is it typical I'm having a bad day behavior, so how do you respond to this? And for me, it's how do you as a parent as well. We had a mix. It was interesting, foster social worker, parent, anyways. And how do you keep your sanity in all this as a parent? Because you have a secondary, I'm going to call it secondary trauma response as a parent as well, when you're always constantly having to deal with that fight response. So how do you, not to turn it around back to the parent, but I think that's an important, how can you make your kid feel safe if you're not feeling safe? So that's just what I wanted to share.
Interesting. And thanks for the ideas of, the logistics too. It's wonderful to have that perspective. Anyone else want to jump in here? No. Okay. So we'll move on to the next. Let me just
say something.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I was just going to say for our group, it was really interesting. We had people with different levels of experience, and we were a couple of adoptive parents, and we had a student there as well. That was really interesting to hear that perspective, to hear how I think she's understanding it quite well, and how different children have different ways. And one parent was talking about how, some fight reactions, she wouldn't necessarily want other people to be around. They might be afraid, but she was understanding how it wasn't actually a risk to them. They were actually safe, but it was just that was your child's way of expressing himself, right? So it was interesting to hear all those different perspectives.
Yeah. When it's like, here's an idea, and then it gets a little messy when you start talking about real situations, because it's not as neat and tidy as, a PowerPoint explains it to be. Yeah, so it's good. And it's good to have that. We feel so grateful for the mix of people that are here tonight too. So we're going to move on to a couple, some of, the whole, how do you stay regulated piece, the sort of dynamics with you and them is kind of part of what we're going to talk about next. Okay, this is one of the things that around the strategies, there was, in when we talked about each of the trauma reactions, we had some ideas of what are some ways to help kids feel better and calmer, and how do you react in the situation? How do you make them feel safe? There's this really relatively simple idea that's really quite complicated called the 3 R's. Anyone who's been in any groups with me would probably hear me talk about it because I love it. And once you hear about it, you start realizing it applies to everyone, not just kids. So the idea is that when a child or anybody is in a situation where they're having a trauma reaction, they're unregulated, what you want to do as the caregiver is you want to help them regulate, or you help them regulate. So often that's very sensory, some of those strategies we talked about earlier in the webinar, calm, give them something to eat, something, a warm blanket, those sorts of things, so that it's very much of a sensory way of helping them regulate, or waiting until they are calmer. But through that, the next stage is relate. So what you want to do at this point is let them know you're there. So the first part is just the sensory experience. The next part is, I love you, I see you, I hear you. And it's not really talking about behavior. So just letting them know you're there, because it's like they're in a storm and there's this voice from afar saying, I love you, basically. They're still in the storm. The storm is, as the storm becomes less, that relate, letting them know you're there. And then the third is reason. And the idea for reason, why it's third, is it might not be actually that day. It might be the next day. It could be 20 minutes later. It could be next week. It's when they're ready to really understand that. So this comes from Dr. Bruce Perry. So it's actually a triangle, because it is like the brainstem, the limbic system, and then your cortex, right? So the reason is really the cortex level. So it's cognitive stuff. So if you're unregulated, your brain is not able to reason at that point. So the idea is using those 3 R's as a way to cope in that situation. Anything you want to add, Patricia or Catherine, to that?
I think what I would say is each child is different when it comes to what works to regulate for them. So you really get to know what works for some and others. Some of them it's touch, some of them it's doing, like you say, sensory things. So some would want to hug, some won't. Some want you to rub them back, some would rather just dig around in the dirt. You saw a lot of examples where crunchy foods and things like that. It's part of regulating is really trying to ground them, have them kind of come back to their body. I know when my little guy is in that super excited mode where I can see he's sort of in flight mode, a lot of the time, I don't know if you guys know, I do the wheelbarrow with him, because it takes so much to concentrate to do that. So you grab his legs and these little ones, I go, okay, let's wheelbarrow to the kitchen, because he's in that happy-go-lucky mood anyway, so he's all for it. And as he does that, he's got to think about, first of all, he stops thinking about what's bothering him, because he's got to think about, I got to put my hand here, a hand there, I got to balance. And then within 5 or 6 steps, and sometimes it's 3 times around the room, then he's sort of forgotten whatever it was that set him off. And he's ready now to, okay, let's talk. What happened, buddy? And go there. But not every child is like that. My daughter needs time to herself. So for her, it's more about being there and not there at the same time. She will literally tell us to go away, but as we walk away, she says, don't leave me. Like it's a tug of war that's there. So you have to sort of give them space, but stay close by until they regulate. Yeah. So every child's different.
To me,
go ahead, Kat.
To me, the most important part is the middle, is the relate, because not only does that help in the moment, it builds for the future. So when you're building that relationship and affirming and bonding, then I find you have less episodes where you have to regulate when kids learn that you're there and they're safe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
think-
feel like for me, I think about this regulate. Sometimes, like since I've learned this, I'll be in situations and I'll think, oh, they're not regulated.
Hmm.
Like I'll be in the middle of an interaction with someone and I'll think, oh, they're not regulated. So I need to think about their emotional state versus keep on arguing with them.
And regulating is a very personal thing too. So what happens is sometimes what you might not seem to you as regulating, that's what they're doing, like swinging. A lot of kids swinging will be regulating, or even
Right.
running is regulating. So you feel like they're just over agitated in a difficult situation, but it's really their way of working through that.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
question.
Well, there's a question. Actually, there's two comments. Sorry. So, Dr. Perry, I'm listening to Dr. Perry, Bruce Perry, and Oprah Winfrey's audiobook right now. What's
Yes.
happened to? Yeah, it is really recommended. This is one of the reasons we're doing this as well. But it's a really good book. I would recommend it as well. And someone asks, how do you do the 3 R's when the anger is directed at you? So it is tough. And it's really hard not to take it personally when the anger is coming at you. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next thing, about how in this whole equation right now, we've talked a lot about the child, but you do have to get yourself in the right headspace to help them through this as well. So that's the next part. I do want to add the reasoning part too, is as you practice this with kids more and more and more, you get to sort of figure out when it's time to go back to the reasoning. Sometimes it's 10 minutes later, sometimes it's 3 days later. And it's just revisiting whatever the triggering factor was so you can plan for next time, basically. It's not necessarily about finding, now I can apply the consequence to, no, it's how do we avoid this next time? And you also see that as kids realize this works for them, even without realizing it, they eventually naturally come back to you for that reasoning part. They will come to close the loop. Yeah.
And can I say, like, how to do this too when the anger is directed at you? Just one thing, when you're doing it, make sure you are safe. Like I do this and with my youngest, and the anger is always at whoever's closest. So it's usually the person doing the 3 R's. And I make sure that I am at a distance where I can't get hurt, but I still say the regulating things, I still do them and slowly move closer as things get safer.
Yeah, even if it's behind the door, but you're,
Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that we have talked about as an organization, and certainly in some of our groups too, is, if it's a really unsafe situation, there's like creating safety plans and, finding other resources, neighbors and, depending on how extreme the behavior is, which, can happen. Right. So that's also a practical element within all of this. Okay. So we're just going to move on here. So we're going to put you back into groups quickly. And what we want you to do is share an example of where your child was having a trauma reaction, and then talk about how you would use the 3 R's. So we've got a few more ideas to go over tonight. Just any interesting comments come out of that group? Anybody want to share quickly?
The big question for us came as to how do you help a child regulate, and understanding what that is. And we just talked about how it can be different for every child, and how it's very much about how to get them grounded and back into their own, how to get them connected to their own emotions, but in a calm way. So,
yeah. So maybe talking a little bit more about what does regulated look like, and yeah, cool. Okay, well, we're going to go through the next little bit. Just hold on here. Present. Here we go. Okay. So thank you for that. It is hard, you know, when you're in a real room situation, I can hear the chatter, I can see the chatter, where I can't do that via Zoom. So it's a bit, you know, it's a different feeling. Technology. Okay, so the idea that the more healthy relationship a child has, the more likely he will recover from trauma and thrive. Relationships are the agents of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love. Our hero, Dr. Bruce Perry. So, you know, that idea that you are that healing, you know, I think we think about, you know, our kids need therapy and they need all kinds of services, which they do. But ultimately, it's about the loving relationship you provided to them, right? Is the main vehicle for change. So that's wonderful, but it's also really hard, right? It's not hard to love them, but it's hard to feel good about everything that's happening. So I just want to show a little, going back to this brain image. And again, around this idea of being regulated. So the image on the left is a healthy brain, right? A healthy state where this is a regulated person, you know, some brainstem activity, but mostly neocortex, you know, good limbic activity. The image on the right is a child who's traumatized, you know, having a trauma reaction. So through your calmness, as you are regulated, you can help regulate that child. So the more regulated you are, is the only way a child can really become regulated, right? And if you're not regulated, you can't, it doesn't work that way, right? As we kind of know. So there's this concept called relational contagion. And certainly, you know, because we're human and we're wired for this, that when a child's unregulated, we become unregulated. Like that's normal, that's going to happen. So we just figure out ways to prepare yourself for those times and strategize around that, so that when that happens, of course you're going to become unregulated. No one can be completely calm in these situations. So trying to find ways to have that feedback loop happen as much as it can. So I want you to think a little bit about your own screen, sorry, is covering something here. I just want to move this. Thinking about, you know, obviously when our kids are really out of sorts, we're not going to remain calm. But, you know, through discussing this with other parents, sometimes certain things that are just the wildest behavior is not our trigger. And then other things that are maybe minor become your trigger, right? So understanding what our own triggers are, because one person's, you know, like somebody lying, that might be the worst behavior ever. Someone else, it's, you know, hitting, you know, whatever those behaviors are that trigger you, getting to know them, right? So think of a situation where you're really upset or connected, and you know, this is just for you to kind of absorb in your own mind. If you want to write it down, feel free. So situations where you're really upset and couldn't think straight. You're at the brainstem level, right? Which trauma reaction did you experience? And what were you actually experiencing? So I had a situation, I won't get into specifics of it, but I had a situation where I was really upset with how somebody acted in a situation. And I could not think straight. And I was thinking, oh my God, I was just so angry with this person. And I was realizing the feeling was betrayal. Like underneath it all, it was a sense of betrayal that I was feeling. And then I went back to, I remembered as a little girl, you know, there was kids next door that were mean to me. And the next day, my sister was playing with those kids. And I felt that feeling, like I actually could go right. It's like, what am I feeling? Why am I so upset about this situation? And it was really 2-year-old Suzanne was upset in 2021 about something that happened a long time ago, right? So what happens, all those people that we love and care about, what happens at work, it happens in, with friends, but it happens a lot with people we love. The closer we are to them, the more likely you're going to have a trigger, right? So the reason we have this slide up is just for you to think about what are those things for you? Because obviously you're all caring for kids who are really good at pushing buttons, right? But knowing what your buttons are and knowing why you have those buttons and then dealing with those buttons so that there's a story behind all your triggers that's an opportunity for your own healing, right? Yes.
Can I add? So one thing I want to add is the hardest thing about these triggers is when a child is exhibiting a behavior that's particularly triggering to you, it's really hard to not take it personally and feel like it's purposeful, like it's done on purpose.
Yeah.
You think he knows that's bothering me. That's what's going on. But really, it's, even though it's hard, you have to take a step back and know it's not, they don't specifically say that's going to hurt her the most. No, that's just their go-to. That's their place to let that out. And it just so happens it's your trigger spot. So,
yes. And it's your story. Like when we feel a certain way, we create a story in our mind.
Yeah.
So it's like thinking about those and obviously raising kids who've been through a lot put you in this situation a lot.
And it's perfectly normal to only have that conversation with yourself after things have already happened, right? Like sometimes it takes a minute to go, oh man, so that's what it was. Okay, so how am I going to do this next time?
Yeah.
And sometimes it means that when that particular behavior is happening, you need to step out and let somebody else handle the situation. And it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But once you recognize where it comes from, that's where the healing begins. So we all, like obviously we're talking about kids who've had extremes in their lives, but everybody has traumas in their life and everybody has triggers. So it's like trying to figure that out. So that trying to stay regulated so you can help them regulate, it's key. So it is a lot of work, and it's a lot of work on top of helping your child, but helping yourself is helping your child, right? So it's all interconnected. So tools for us and our kids. We'll just go through these real quick. There's this really fun little thing which kind of reinforces a lot of what we're doing. It's called the hand model. And I'll just send it to, do we have time to watch it, or do you think we just send people the link? What? I can't hear you, Patricia.
Sorry, I'm muted. We can send it when we send along the recording,
So
or we can play it at the end too.
Yeah, okay, we'll do that. And then what survival, I do want to show you guys this because it's really amazing. Patricia found this when she was prepping for adoption month. So it's a little workbook, and we're going to send this to you, even though it's already on our website. We're going to send it in our email to you. So what survival looks like for me, and it's basically a little workbook you can do with your kids. And it's really nice, kid-friendly language. When I was little, some wires got connected to the wrong places in my brain. I often think and feel like I'm under attack. Even when I'm actually very safe, my brain activates survival mode to protect me. So all the stuff that we just learned, you can sit down with your child, and these kids, they know that they're aware that what's happening to them is different than what's happened to other kids, right? So it's a really healthy way to have that conversation with them, and then you give examples of what they talk about. Yeah, oh yeah, I do that, and what happens when you do that, right?
Yeah, and you might discover things like they say, oh, my tags always bother me, and they can draw on there and things. And once you have it, it's really great to share with other people who work with them to help them recognize those things. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay, because I know you know this stuff really well. So I appreciate that. And it is kind of little kiddish, but it's really, I think an older child would like, it's kind of simple. But I think even a teenager might get into this as well. And on the website, on the page that we have on this, there are things around different age groups too. Okay, I just want to make sure I do not close the wrong thing here. Okay, so what survival looks like for me. Okay, so whoops. Okay, so in conclusion, you are not alone. We had dozens of people tonight who are kind of in the same spot, right? So connect with a network, because it helps reinforce. Like, I think what happens too is some of the stuff, probably some of you already knew, but it's always good to be reminded, every time you go, oh yeah, because our society tends to think, if you do this, this is what should happen, and it's often way more complicated than that. So we do have a bunch of stuff here, like upcoming activities. We're going to be talking about trauma all month, and we're going to be actually focusing on each of the four trauma reactions each week. We're going to be doing this session in French for people that would like to sit in on the French session too. That would be wonderful, and also promote it to any French families What else do we have coming up? We have the high needs group here. I'll just do a quick. This is our website for adoption month. That lists all of our programs. So just like the way you registered for this, we have the high needs one coming up next Tuesday, which probably most parents who are in this session can relate to that. We have a core program, Parenting in the Trenches. Somebody from the North American Council on Adoptable Children will be talking about parenting in real nitty gritty. Kim's late night group, raising transracial adoptees. A woman who's an adoptee herself, talking about what that experience is like and what are some strategies to respect the experience kids come from. There's going to be a French only group, and then a few presentations. We're going to have a youth panel as well. Okay, let me just close this out. And just taking care of yourself is important. Ultimately, the best thing you can do for your children is figure out your own triggers, figure out ways for you to be regulated, because you are the tool, you are the intervention for your child, right? So finding time for you. And here's all of our contacts. Me, Patricia, Catherine, and then we have our other staff, all adoptive parents. I'm not an adopter and Brandy's not, but we have lots of experience in the field. But these guys are all available. And you also click join in the network. If you're not already a part of the network, you can register here. And then my last summary, feeling safe is the treatment. For all of us, we need to also feel safe, right? Emotionally as well as physically.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to stop the share. How do I do this? I don't know. It says new share. Oh, stop the share. There we go.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Okay, so we're a little 9:15. Hopefully that was okay for people, timing wise. So what we just have questions. If you have any questions or comments, if people want to, it's getting late. If you feel like you need to go and regulate yourself with a warm blanket and a cup of hot chocolate in front of the TV, that's okay. But we're going to stick around and chat if people want to just, debrief a little bit too. So.
And we're going to get a recording of this session out to everyone, including the presentation and the links to the information we have. So feel free, like Suzanne said, we're here anytime you guys need to connect. The whole team's here for you for sure.
Yeah. And I do want to say, part of how I became more aware of trauma reactions was, as a group, because we we have a group of staff and some of our volunteers, you know, are all adoptive parents raising kids who've had a lot of trauma that, you know, I don't think there's, you know, what, you know, some of the real hard stuff that's happening in your family, these guys understand. Like no one's going to go, oh my God, I can't believe that's happening, right? It's going to be very much, yes, I understand.
We're getting a lot of thank yous, Suzanne, just so you know, lots of comments and thank yous and great session and eye-opening, people are saying, so thank you.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, and it's heavy, but I think it's, in some ways, it's also simple, but it's not easy.
Bye. Does anyone want to share or have a question? It was just a small group now. We can go back to what we're saying. Barb says thank you.
Yeah.
It's great to see such a good mix of people for sure.
Yes. Well, during COVID, we haven't had as many, you know, professionals involved or students or, you know, thanks, Adam, that it's good to have those different perspectives. Oh, Vanessa McDonald?
I think she's having some connection problems.
Okay, yeah, once your internet goes out.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Lynn, for participating. Oh, that's sweet.
That is nice.
We'll share that's one thing that's true. It's a difficult topic and we realize that. I'll be open and honest with all of you is when we reviewed this together as a team earlier, it's hard to not have tears come to your eyes when you read through and see what these kids are feeling and living and you go, oh, that's what he or she meant, or that's what, because in difficult moments like that, as the parent, you're also in a heightened emotional state. And, you know, nobody asks those kids to be aware of the people around them and considerate of their feelings, but we put that on ourselves, right? We say, how did I react that way when I should have been aware of their feelings? But, you know, they're in there too, so it's okay, it's normal. Yeah. And so as Suzanne was saying, taking care of yourself is important, even if that means coming in and joining one of our sessions just to talk about it and get it off your chest and not feel the judgment, you know, or just reach out to one of us sometimes and get it out. And we're never going to say, oh, that was the wrong thing to do. No.
And I would say too that, you know, obviously going to counseling and talking to, you know, specialists is really important if you need to. You know, one things we've heard from participants is talking with other parents who've been there is actually more therapeutic for them. Can be, you know, it can be that experience of, oh, okay, me too. You know, it's really, really helpful.
We learned a nice trick for my daughter, and I'm not sure if it was at one of these through the adoption network or not, and maybe it'll be kind of that video because I never know if anyway, it's called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it always brings me back. And basically, and I know I'm going to mess it up, but it's basically the idea that when your child is not at the point where they're crazy inflamed, but when they've their fire's burnt out a little bit and you can at least kind of see their, you know, they're
spotting it, they're starting to
looking at your eyes, like you're starting to get them a bit. You look at them and you hold your hands up and you say, can you tell me 5 things you can see?
Oh, yes.
And my daughter, usually she'll scoff at the first couple. Like she won't even acknowledge that I've said it, or so she'll say, Mom, I don't want to play that game or whatever. And then the next one you say, okay, baby, but can you identify 4 things you can hear?
Yeah.
And then, okay, 3 things you can feel. And anything like, you know, do you feel the wind in your hair? Can you feel the snot coming down your nose? Like, it doesn't have to be graceful. It doesn't have to be anything awesome. And then, you know, finally the taste, and the taste always gets to me because, you know, without being whatever and not being too emotional, but like, it's always her tears. Like that's always what she ends up tasting. So it's awful, but it's triumphant in the end too, because she's never been able to stay in a fit and also get to number 1. So it's either one or the other. Either we can't do it and we have to give up because mama can't get her there, or she can fulfill the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and she can calm. Yeah. And at least get to that point.
Yeah, it's a very grounding exercise. It's funny, in the last breakout sessions, I shared that too, because it does work. I had to do it with my son the other day in the middle of Costco, where he was starting to go. I said, okay, stop. What do you see? And yeah, and it does help. Yeah.
Wow. You could build that into next week's when you do it in French.
Thank you for sharing, Candace.
Yeah. It reminds me, when you say that, it reminds me of being a little girl, and when you're just so tired from crying and that salty tears, runny nose.
Mhm. And to be honest, I use it on myself. Like I do, I use it. And I'm a child who's always done this. And I've taught my daughter that one. Like if I'm in a stressful situation, I'll fidget my toes or I'll fidget my fingers, and I'll notice myself. Now I've added to that. Like if I'm doing this, I'll go, okay, 5 things you can see, like you need to regulate, like 4 things you can smell, like, and I mess them up all the time. It doesn't really matter. It's just getting yourself, getting, like they said, back to your senses and back to that part of your
It's
brain.
like the head and shoulders, knees and toes. I gave that as an
for
example too.
sure.
When they're little, that always works. Yeah.
I'm trying the wheelbarrow. I'm trying that. My
Oh, that
daughter
one
will.
was amazing.
She does her head like this, like kind of like she's a little rock star, and she'll do a bit of a head banging thing, and I and it kind of scares me. So I'm gonna try the wheelbarrow and see if it gives her a similar feeling, but not.
They're basically, they're stimming, right? So they're trying to figure out, and sometimes it can, we tend to overreact when they're doing that, and it might be disturbing to their surroundings, but that's what they're doing. They're regulating. So, and sometimes it's quiet stimming, and sometimes it could be the kids who's screaming at the top of their lungs, but they're regulating. So yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Katie, I see you looking. Do you have something to share?
Oh, I'm listening to everything because I balled everything up and never told anybody.
Yeah.
So it's really awesome.
You were a fawn.
Well, I hope you can join us at our Tuesday session next week. It's really good, a good group to just listen to.
I will. Like, I'm up in the Acadian Peninsula, so it's French here. Not that that's a problem, but everybody knows everybody, and our little boy comes from this area, and I have a really hard time opening up and talking about how difficult it is for us, because I guess we didn't think it was going to be, or it was supposed to be, but it is.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing, Katie. That's one of the reasons.
You're the one. You reached out. I really, really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I am a good mom doing good work.
Yes.
You are.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
I have that pasted on my mirror in the morning, and I am.
Yeah.
Because we have 3 grown children, 3 grown sons and 2 grandchildren. And to go through being a parent all over again and realize that you don't know, excuse the expression, shit. Honestly, it was really humbling and really scary, because nothing that we had figured out that worked before was working. So yeah, we do need each other for sure.
Yeah.
Trauma's a big deal. A really big deal.
Yeah.
I hope that these little people that we have been entrusted with, I hope somewhere along the line we're going to be able to say that they're awesome adults. I feel like the time is running out and they're getting older by every minute, and you're just praying that you're going to figure it out before you can't change how they are anymore. Or, like, that's my biggest fear is not having enough time to help him learn the strategies that he's going to need to cope.
Yeah. We're having a youth panel at the end of the month. And you, through interacting with them, because some of them were not easy kids, but now they're pretty amazing.
Yeah, and it's
So
getting
it's
from,
it's like they're working out what they're doing is they're working out their trauma, right? They're processing it. So it's not easy and it's not great, but it is them addressing what happened to them, right? It's about
even
what
though
happened.
even though they don't even remember really.
No, exactly. I look at it, my daughter was 2 and she had a wonderful foster home, but something along the way happened, something. And like, she is in fear 24/7, right? Like, that's the hard thing to think about these kids who have lived trauma. They're, even though some of them mask so well, so you don't know,
Yeah,
you know,
amazing.
yeah. So that's the difficult part about being a grown-up, is to go, if they're not attacking me, right? So you got to take a step back and go, it looks like they're perfect. And all of a sudden they like, I'm going to kill you. And it's, they're just trying to survive. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, this is so amazing to help understand all that, rather than thinking he's just being a brat or he's misbehaving or he's a lying manipulator.
Yeah.
Those, until you understand that that is the reason for why they're doing what they're doing. And that's not really the issue at all, really.
I think one of the important things about this community we have is that we understand that of each other. And it's hard to find that out in the world when people don't know what it's like to raise a trauma child. And you can feel judged by people's reactions on how you handle things. Like, how do you let him get away with that?
Yes.
And you have to, again, you're the adults, and it sucks that we have to be the ones, but you have to be the one that go, okay, I'm not going to listen to that person. They don't know. I'm going to go talk to people who do know, and I'm going to help myself too. And it's just, you have to tell them you don't know, or just ignore them. And it's really hard. It really, really is, because it's always that little voice in the back of your head, right? But
we'll just have to practice.
Yes, and find the people who understand. Find the people who understand.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this. It was really awesome. Really awesome.
Thank you for letting us know that.
Yes, thank you, Kate.
Yes.
Next time, I will definitely try to do a much better job of staying closer to people that are living the same thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. And good night to everybody. Thank you so much.
Good night.